Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Farhana binti Anwar, and today I'll be presenting on the first part of this chapter, which is style. An introduction, we'll be looking at the definition of the terms that we'll find throughout this chapter. Style, a general characteristic of intellectual functioning and personality type that differs us from other individuals. Strategy, specific methods of approaching a problem or task, modes of operation for achieving a particular end, plan designed for controlling and manipulating certain information. Learning strategy, technique used by individuals to tackle a problem or enhance their learning. Cognitive style, the way we learn and solve problems linked with our personality and cognition. The link is called cognitive style. Learning style, when cognitive styles are related to educational context, it is known as learning style. Learning style are traits that you have that indicate how you perceive, interact, and process what you learn. So now we'll be looking at the learning styles. The first one is field independence and field sensitivity. Field independence. Field independent style is a skill that allows one to perceive a particular relevant item in a field of distracting items. It enables you to distinguish parts from a whole, to concentrate on something, and to analyze separate variables without the disturbance of other variables. The next one is field sensitivity, or also known as field dependence. It is the tendency to be dependent on the total field. It enables you to perceive the whole picture, the general configuration of a problem or idea or event. Next is the pros and cons for field independence and field sensitivity. Field independence. The pro is you can analyze the detail without getting distracted from other variables. For example, the ability to read a book in a noisy environment. The con is it may result on tunnel vision, where you won't be able to see the bigger picture, only the part as itself. The pro for field sensitivity is you are able to see the bigger picture and then connects the detail. The con is a person may get distracted easily, thus fail to identify the part. So, how field independence and field sensitivity is relevant to language learning? So, field independence are students that is able to focus on part. So, this type of student prefer deductive learning and better learning in detail and focus drill. For example, grammar drill. So, student with field sensitivity prefers to see things in bigger picture. So they prefer inductive learning, and they also can master communicative aspect of language easily. The next style is left brain and right brain dominance. Left brain dominance. Student with left brain dominance is better at analytical thought with mathematical and linear processing of information. They also deal better at producing separate words, gathering the specific of language, carrying out sequences of operation, and dealing with abstraction. Student with right brain dominance is better at perceiving and remembering visual, tactile, and auditory images. They also deal better with whole images, with generalization, with metaphor, and with emotional reaction and artistic expression. So this is an excerpt from the textbook where table 5.1 is showing us the left brain and right brain characteristic. The next learning style is ambiguity tolerance. It is the ability to tolerate ideas and propositions that goes against your belief or structure of knowledge. Open-minded individuals who possess ambiguity tolerance are able to accept new ideas, concepts, and knowledge easily, even if it is a totally new subject. People with AT have higher chances in successful language learning. One disadvantage is people with AT may become wishy-washy, which is adopting in anything goes, as they accept everything without analyzing and rejecting certain elements. Thus, ambiguity intolerance is important because it avoids one from becoming wishy-washy, as they are able to analyze and reject contradicting concepts or elements. So now we'll look at reflectivity and impulsivity. Students who is reflective tend to make slower and calculated decisions. On the other hand, students who are impulsive tend to make impulsive decisions. Reflective students can identify loopholes, venture possible solutions, and weigh all consideration of a problem before coming into a decision. Impulsive students rely on hunches and gamble on decision. After a few successful gamble, a decision will be made. Reflective students are slower but more accurate reader. Impulsive students read faster. Reflective student remains longer at a particular learning stage, while impulsive students have rapid stage transition but produce more error. Last learning style is visual, auditory, and kinesthetic style. I think this one is quite straightforward, as we are already familiar with this learning style. So visual learner prefer reading, studying charts, drawing graphic information. Auditory learner prefer listening to audio tapes or lectures. Kinesthetic learner prefer demonstration and physical activity that involve movement. As a teacher, it is important for us to actually be able to identify our students' learning style. So, how are we going to identify this learning style? An individual can determine their learning style through a self-check questionnaire. Educators like us would need information and student learning style in order to cater and enhance student learning. Other methods of determining learning style are COBS, 1999 Learning Style Inventory, and also Oxford 1995 Style Analysis Survey. The conclusion for this part of this chapter is each individual owns a specific set of learning style. Through the knowledge of learning strategies, which we will be discussing later, one can enhance their learning.
Hello, my name is Farhana Najdah and I'm going to continue part 2 of the chapter, Strategies. I'm going to explain about strategies, learning strategies, communication strategies, and also it includes avoidance strategies and compensatory strategies. If styles are general characteristics that differentiate one individual from another, then strategies are those specific attacks that we make on a given problem and that vary considerably within each individual. They are the moment-by-moment technique that we employ to solve problems posed by second language input and output. Chamot 2005 defines strategies quite broadly as procedures that facilitate a learning task. Strategies are most often conscious and goal-driven. The Hall of Second Language Acquisition has distinguished between two types of strategy: learning strategies and communication strategies. First, a brief historical note on the study of second language learner strategies. As our knowledge of second language acquisition increased markedly during the 1970s, teachers and researchers came to realize that no single research finding and no single method of language teaching would usher in an era of universal success in teaching a second language. We saw that certain learners seem to be successful regardless of methods or techniques of teaching. Rubin and Thompson, 1982, later summarized 14 such characteristic good language learners. So you can read all the 14 characteristics of good language learner according to Rubin and Thompson. Such lists, speculative as they were in the mid-1970s, inspired a group of collaborators in Toronto to undertake a studies of good language learning traits. While the empirical results of the Toronto study were somewhat disappointing, they nevertheless spurred many other researchers to try to identify characteristics of successful language learners and even unsuccessful learners. The research on the mid-1970s led to some very careful defining of specific learning strategies. In some of the most comprehensive research of this kind, Michael O'Malley and Anna Chamot studied the use of strategies by learners of English as a second language in the United States. Typically, strategies were divided into three main categories: metacognitive strategies, cognitive strategies, and social-affective strategies. So, metacognitive strategies is a term used in information processing theory to indicate an executive function. Strategies that involve planning for learning, thinking about the learning process as it is taking place, monitoring of one's production or comprehension, and evaluating learning after an activity is completed. Cognitive strategies are more limited to specific learning tasks and involve more direct manipulation of the learning material itself. Social affective strategies have to do with social mediating activity and interacting with others. Now let's go through the metacognitive strategies first. Advanced organizers, making a general but comprehensive review of the organizing concept or principle in an anticipated learning activity. In other words, it is a way for you to predict what's going to be coming ahead of time. You try to organize into groups so that you can be prepared for the information that is coming. Next, we have directed attention. Deciding in advance to attend in general to a learning task and to ignore irrelevant detractors. It is where you're focusing on the information that is coming and the other things that are not related to your learning, you're trying to get rid of it. You try to not focus on. Next is selective attention. Deciding in advance to attend to specific aspect of language input or situational details that will cue the retention of language input. It is where you're actually focusing not just on the information that you are trying to learn, but also certain segment of it so that you can get your main ideas and you're trying to look for that specific information, whether you are reading or listening to it. Next, we got self-management. Understanding the condition that help one learn and arranging for the presence of those conditions. In simpler words, you deliberately put yourself in places where you can learn and you don't study in front of the TV while you're listening to music and talking to the phone. You manage your time so that you learn in a place or in an environment that is conducive to learning. Moving on to the next point, functional planning. Planning for and rehearsing linguistic component necessary to carry out an upcoming language task. That is where you try to anticipate the function that you need. For example, like asking directions or collecting information, greeting someone, whatever that function is, you are trying to plan ahead and try to learn a couple of those phrases that you may need so that you can be successful when you do it. Next, self-monitoring. Correcting one's speech for accuracy in pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, or for appropriateness related to the setting or to the people who are present. As you are speaking and then hearing others, you are monitoring what's going on so you can try to analyze what you are saying versus what other people are saying, trying to find the congruity and whatnot. Moving on to the next point, delay production. Consciously deciding to postpone speaking in order to learn initially through listening comprehension. You deliberately wait to respond or to write so that you can see what other people are doing. You take advantage of the other information, and there are people who are talking, people who are writing, and you try to collect it so you can try to get a better response. Last point is self-evaluation. Checking the outcomes of one's own language learning against an internal measure of completeness and accuracy. After you write something or after you say something, you then analyze it. How was this process? Was it good? How can I improve that process? Now we are done with metacognitive strategies. Now let's move on to the cognitive strategies. Repetition. Imitating a language models including over practice and silent rehearsal. Repetition is a good way to continue the language learning. Second, resourcing. Using target language references materials. Are you taking the available resources within the culture, within the situation that you are in to help you learn language, or reading up text and you got poster or captions or graph, or are you taking advantage of those resources that have an extra materials in the back, for example? Translation. Using the first language as a base for understanding or producing the second language. Next, grouping. Reordering or reclassifying and perhaps labeling the material to be learned based on common attributes. You've got a variety of bits of information and you try to categorize them to help you understand and process that information. Next is note-taking. This is very simple. Basically, just write down the main ideas, important points, outlines, or summary of information presented orally or in writing. Moving on to the next point, deduction. Consciously applying rules to produce or understand the second language. Recombination. Constructing a meaningful sentence or larger language sequence by combining known elements in a new way. It is where you got all these different pieces and you're trying to put them together in different ways so that you can learn new information. Imagery. Relating new information to visual concept in memory via familiar, easily retrievable with visualization phrases. You try to picture in your mind what this person is saying or what this text is trying to say so that you can understand what's going on. Next, auditory representation. Retention of the sound from similar sound. You got a series of ideas and you want to try to remember it by hooking it to a sound or to a phrase so that will help you to understand and remember it. Now moving on to the next point, keyword. Remembering a new word in the second language by identifying a familiar word in the first language that sounds like or otherwise resembles the new word and generating easily recalled image of some relationship between the new word and familiar word. Contextualization. Placing a word or phrase in meaningful language sequence relating new information to other concepts in memory. It is when placing a word or phrase in a meaningful language sentence. This happens during the process of writing and reading as you read the information you are relating to the topic to your own perception. For example, when you read about a beach and you recall back the memory that you have spent on the beach. Elaboration. Relating new information to other concepts in memory. Transfer. Using previously acquired linguistic and conceptual knowledge to facilitate a new language learning task. It is transferring from what you know to something that you don't know. And last point for cognitive strategies is inferencing. Using available information to guess meanings of new items, predict outcomes, or fill in missing information. Now let's move on to the third box, social affective strategies. There are only 2 points, cooperation and question for clarification. For cooperation, working with one or more peers to obtain feedbacks or model a language activity. And question for clarification, you can ask teacher or other native speaker for repetition, paraphrasing, explanation, and examples. So we are done with 3 learning strategies. Metacognitive strategies, cognitive strategies, and also social affective strategies. While learning strategies deal with the receptive domain of intake, memory, storage, and recall, communication strategies pertain to the employment of verbal or nonverbal mechanism for the productive communication of information. Some time ago, Fang and Casper defined communication strategies as potentially conscious plans for solving what to an individual presents itself as a problem in reaching a particular communicative goal. While the research of the last decade does indeed focus largely on the compensatory nature of communication strategies, more recent approaches seem to take a more positive view of communication strategies as elements of an overall strategic competence in which learners bring to bear all the possible facets of their growing competence in order to send clear messages in the second language. Moreover, such strategies may or may not be potentially conscious. Support for such a conclusion comes from observation of first language acquisition strategies that are similar to those used by adults in second language learning contexts. So what is avoidance strategies and what is compensatory strategies? So avoidance strategies, learners avoid using certain forms in the language learned. It is a combination of face saving and maintaining communicative interaction. While compensatory strategies is a common set of communication devices involves compensation for missing knowledge. Now let's take a quick look at the avoidance strategies. Message abandonment. Leaving a message unfinished because of language difficulties. For example, you are trying to work on something or you're trying to convey a message but it cannot be done. Then ambiguity fits in and you say, okay, I give up, I'm not going to worry about it now. So you can see the example in the box where second language learner say, I lost my road, and native speaker replied, you lost your road, and second language learner reply again, I got lost. Here you can see how the second language learner avoid or you can say ignore the mistake. Next is topic avoidance. Whole topic or conversation might be avoided entirely. So if for example, there's a topic that I know but I don't know a lot of vocabulary for, so I'm going to avoid this topic. If I try to relate this with real life situation, for example, if I talk with someone that I met, she is an astrophysicist, maybe. I love astronomy and I want to talk to her about it, but I don't know any astronomy words, so I want to try to avoid that. Same thing with medicine. They have specific jargon that they use and I don't know any medical terms, so I avoid it. Now let's go through the compensatory strategies. First is circumlocution, describing or exemplifying the target object of action. In other words, circumlocution is the ability to go around a word that you don't know. For example, I want to talk to you about I've got this animal in my yard and I don't know what is the word, so I try to describe it by saying well, it got 4 legs and have this kind of long ears and hops around. Then you say, oh, it's a rabbit. And then I say, yeah, that's right, it's a rabbit. So what I did just now is circumlocution. I talk around a word to try to describe it. Another example would be if I went to a bank and I want to open an account, but I don't know the word account. So I'll use circumlocution. I said, I want to put money in the bank. And the officer would reply, oh, you want an account? So I learned that word. Next is approximation, using an alternative terms which expresses the meaning of the target lexical item as closely as possible. For example, I give you a description but it's not detailed. The explanation is vague but it's there. And so hopefully you'll be able to understand the rest. So next point is use of all-purpose words, extending a general empty lexical item to contexts where specific words are lacking. We hear those a lot when you're talking to people. For example, the word gotcha and this catchphrase word, whereas later on to start using stock phrases that you can use in order to help you communicate. So maybe you are using all these purpose words or you make up a word. For example, a Germany who's trying to tell that it was snowing and didn't know how to put that together until the word become snowing. He made up the word but managed to convey the idea even though it wasn't the right form. Next point is prefabricated patterns. Memorization of certain stock phrases or sentences without internalized knowledge of their components. It's basically just memorize it without knowing the meaning of it, like easy phrases such as how much does this cost, where is the toilet, or I don't speak English. These are common phrases that can be remembered without having to know the meaning of it in order to compensate with the weakness of the language. Not only that, maybe you can use non-linguistic elements, or we call it as a non-linguistic signal, such as use gesture or hand motions or facial expression in order to try to explain something. Basically, it is a great way to communicate because you are compensating for what you don't know. Next is literal translation, translating literally a lexical item, idioms, compound words, or structure from first language to second language. For foreignizing, using first language word but adjusting it to the second language phonology. Moving on to the next point, code switching, using first language word with first language pronunciation or third language with third language pronunciation while speaking in second language. Code switching is the use of a first language or third language within a stream of speech in the second language. Often code switching subconsciously occurred between two advanced learners with a common first language, but in such a case usually not as a compensatory strategies. Learners in the early stages of acquisition, however, might code switch where they use their native language to fill in missing knowledge, whether the hearer knows that native language or not. Sometimes the learner slips in just a word or two in the hope that the hearer will get the gist of what is being communicated. Yet another common compensatory strategy is a direct appeal for help. Often terms appeal to authorities. Learners may, if stuck for a particular word or phrase, directly ask a proficient speaker or the teacher for the form. Last one, you can do the ever famous and. It is what we call as stalling. Using feelings or hesitation devices to fill pauses and to gain time to think, and this to prevent yourself from saying, I don't know. You can use stalling as sort of a compensation for words that you don't know or ideas that you don't understand.
The third part and the last part of this chapter is SBI, strategy-based instruction. Much of the work of researchers and teachers on the application of both learning and communication strategies to classroom learning has come to known as strategies-based instruction, SBI. The key to SBI is to achieve students' autonomy. One of the most important goals of language teaching should be the facilitation of that autonomy. So in SBI, the role of the teacher is as a facilitator. However, it has been found that students will benefit from SBI if 1. They understand the strategy itself, 2. Perceive it to be effective, and 3. Do not consider its implementation to be overly difficult. The first step in SBI is stimulating awareness. It is crucial to identify learner style and linking them with potential strategies. Once style preferences have been identified, a learner can proceed to take action through strategies. By then, teacher can start incorporating SBI in communicative language courses and classroom. Teacher need to provide extra class assistance for learners who maybe are lagging behind or find language learning to be a bit difficult. So, the question here is how to identify learner style preference by using style awareness checklist. Style awareness checklist is basically a questionnaire that the student can fill on their own. With that information, teacher can later create strategies to accommodate the learner's style of learning. Style awareness checklist. So here are some example of the question. You can find the rest of it in the textbook. I don't mind if people laugh at me when I speak. I feel very confident in my ability to succeed in learning this language. I want to learn this language because I can personally gain from it. I really enjoy working with other people in groups. I find ways to continue learning language outside of the classroom. For each question, student will be given 5 options. A, B, C, D, E. It's basically like a Likert scale. They need to check one box on each item that best describes them. Box A and E would indicate that the sentence is very much like them. B and D would indicate that the sentence is somewhat descriptive of them. Box C would indicate that they have no inclination one way or another. This checklist is to satisfy our first step earlier, which is stimulating awareness. The next step is from awareness to action. The checklist earlier is used as an instrument for teachers to put immediate practical value. Through the checklist, teacher can become aware of students' tendencies and then offer informal, unplanned advice on beneficial in-class and extra-class strategies. They can be attuned for their role as facilitators of strategic action through tips and pointers and perhaps even anecdotes on how I learned when I was in your shoes. Teacher can engage with student by 1. A discussion of why they responded as they did. 2. Small group sharing of feelings underlying their responses. 3. An informal tabulation of how people responded to them. 4. Some advice from the teacher's own experience on why certain practices may be successful or unsuccessful. Style awareness checklist is designed with the intention to encourage good language learner characteristic, lower inhibition, encourage risk-taking, build self-confidence, develop intrinsic motivation, engage in cooperative learning, use right brain processes, promote ambiguity tolerance, practice intuition, process error feedback, and set personal goals. Now, the students are aware of the characteristic of good language learner. Teacher can implement their own SBI as part of the lesson. Teacher can utilize such techniques as communicative game, rapid reading, fluency exercise, and error analysis. It is important to explain to students why they are doing these activities. So, for example, when students are playing a guessing game, performing a skit, or even singing song, the teacher can remind them that they are practicing strategies for lowering inhibition.
Building strategic techniques. The first one is lower inhibitions. This can be achieved by playing guessing and communication games. Other than that, teacher can ask students to do role play, sing a song, and have them to share their fears to reduce their anxiety level when using the language. Second is to encourage risk-taking. This can be done by praising students for making sincere efforts in trying out to speak the language. In class, we always emphasize on being grammatically correct, but sometimes it's just better for us to practice more by using fluency exercise where errors are not corrected at the time. Basically, just ask the student talk and don't just focus on the mistake that they made while speaking. Just make sure they are comfortable in using the language. Next is build student self-confidence. This can be done by telling students explicitly that you do believe in them. On the other hand, teacher can ask the student to make lists of their own strength of what they know or have accomplished so far. This can help them to boost up their confidence and drive them to talk the language more confidently. Number 4, help develop intrinsic motivation. Remind them explicitly about rewards for learning English. This can be done by empowering the student with a feelings of conscious choice, or you can beef up the student's self-esteem. Some students tend to fail before they even get down to the task. Make sure the student feel confident about what they do and have the right resource to complete their task. Teacher can also provide honest and instructive feedback. Despite a popular misconception, motivation is not all about praise. It also has to do with relevant encouraging criticism. Number 5, promote cooperative learning. This can be done by getting the class to think of themselves as a team and do a considerably amount of small group work. Collaborative learning teams are said to attain higher level thinking and preserve information for a longer time than students working individually. Next is encourage right brain processing. This can be done in class by showing the student movies and tapes. Other than that, teacher can ask students to read passage rapidly. In addition, teacher can do oral fluency exercises where the objective is to get students to talk or write a lot without being corrected. 7 is promote ambiguity tolerance. Teacher can encourage the students to ask questions when they don't understand something. Teacher should keep the theoretical explanation very simple and brief. Deal with just a few rules at a time. Next, help students to use their intuition. Teacher can praise students for good guesses and do not always give explanation of errors. Teacher should only correct selected error, preferably just those that interfere with learning. 9. Get students to make their mistakes work for them. This can be done by tape recording students' oral production and get them to identify the errors. In other words, let the student to catch and correct each other's error. Teachers should remind the student that it is okay to make mistakes and encourage the student to make lists of their common error and to work on them in their own. Lastly, to get students to set their own goals. So here, teacher can explicitly encourage or direct students to go beyond the classroom goals. Teacher can have them to make the list of what they will accomplish on their own in a particular week.